I often look at my peers and my colleagues and I end up comparing myself to them, and it just makes me feel like I don't belong in a sense around these guys. It makes me feel a little bit like I'm an imposter in these rooms and at these events.
Imposter syndrome comparison, it is a silent epidemic. Often it runs so much deeper than what people realize.
Having imposter syndrome is typically aligned with some type of perfectionism or some type of standard that we're trying to reach.
We all wear these masks, have these personas, put certain expectations on ourselves.
If you're trying to be someone that you're not really, or it's not values aligned, the risk is that gap between who you are and what you really value and who you're trying to be to receive acceptance will burn you out.
Greg, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. We've been 4 weeks in a caravan, my family and I, and so we found our rhythms a bit and found our pinch points. We're enjoying it, and it's good to be in a studio today and looking forward to the episode. How about you?
Very quickly, I had two people ask me from the prior episode, what's up with Greg in a caravan for 3 months? Has he been kicked out of home? Is everything okay with the wife?
Good questions, good questions.
What's the situation?
Yeah. So we had a big booking for Airbnb with our house that we have locally. And we thought, if we take this booking, what should we do with our time? Should we go on a road trip? And if so, how should we do that? So we decided to get a caravan. We were originally going to get a caravan, get a car to tow it, and then sell it after the road trip. And my wife said, hey, after a big roadie in the South Island, New Zealand, you will probably want to keep it. And so we started thinking, how could we keep it? We got a few more bookings for Airbnb. And so it was going to be a 3-month roadie of the South Island. It's now become 6 months in a caravan to take those bookings. And so it's an experiment. My wife's homeschooling the kids. I run an online business. And so we're exploring total remote work with a family of 5, 3 kids under 7 in a caravan, and learning as much as we can.
We'll talk about one of the core tenets of the show, life by design.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was reverse engineering from like, what do we want? How do we make that happen? So I love that in terms of being able to use it as a creative experiment of literally trying out week to week what works, what doesn't. But we're having a lot of fun.
And people can't say you don't practice what you preach.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. What about you, man? How are you?
A lot going on in our household. We're doing sleep training at the moment. So, judging by your facials, you've been there, you know what that's like.
I do.
But, we're on day 3 and, pretty much through it. And it's, it's all purposeful and worth it. So, no, well there, outside of a little bit sleep deprived. Business-wise, I'm not sure if I've told you, but I launched my services a bit more formally in USA 4 days ago. So that's been a lot of work getting up to that point. A lot of clients obviously in Nelson, Auckland, a lot in Australia and a couple in the States, but a bit more of an intentional focus to expanding what I do to reach more people internationally. So
awesome.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you, mate. I'm great.
That's really exciting. And I imagine you're a coffee drinker, yeah?
Absolutely.
So sleep training, children, coffee.
Yes.
So good.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Jamie. So let's get into it, please. Jamie, I'm aware, producer Jamie, that we have another question that has been submitted. Who have you got for us today?
Today we've got Andy, and Andy has submitted a question that we can follow up with the voice note when you're ready. But the question is, why do I doubt myself at work? I feel like an imposter. So something we can all really relate to.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. As you said, it's something that is prevalent in the workplace, particularly. I think where we've got performance and then how am I doing and judging ourselves. What comes to mind for you when you hear that question?
Yeah, what a great question. And by the looks of it, it's, yes, why do I doubt myself at work? But I mean, obviously for those listening, work is just one area of life. And I assume that, we're going to hear some more in Andy's voice note. But, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, comparisons, this can affect all areas of our life. And, usually, Greg, what I find with my clients is, someone might come to me and they might say, I've got this doubt or this uncertainty in this issue and it's having this symptom. But actually, when we look a little bit deeper, we see how it plays out in other areas of their life. If you look a little bit more under the hood. So I think imposter syndrome, comparison, it is a silent epidemic in a sense that a lot of us struggle with. And I think it's a delicate balance of perhaps embracing those challenges and looking to grow if you're a growth minded individual, but also doing it in a way where we're authentic, of course, and we are being who we are, living our values. But certainly, it is probably, I mean, self doubt is probably the number one or two issue that I find myself working with.
Interesting. And prior to this, I knew that the general topic was going to be imposter syndrome. I looked up the definition. It said a persistent internalized belief that a person is not as capable as others believe them to be. So there's this, other people think of me like this, but the truth is I'm really not.
Yes.
And I know, yeah, I imagine for a lot of people, if this is going on, the energy that is expended on a consistent basis at work and in other environments where you are feeling imposter syndrome is a continual battle that is just raging, and maybe in your body and your mind, it's going on. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to relate to this and want to get to the root cause of why does this exist, and it's really relevant.
Absolutely, and it's often it runs so much deeper than what people realize, because many people struggle with impulsive behaviors, overwhelm, stress, self-sabotage. We medicate ourselves with substance, all kinds of things, and even something as simple as self-doubt, and then putting that pressure on ourselves and the ways in which we do that or judge ourselves or beat ourselves up then has a ripple effect into the other areas of our life. So just emphasizing just how um, perhaps how much more it can actually keep us stuck than what people realize. Okay. All right, Jamie. So I believe we've got an audio with a bit more about Andy's situation that he submitted. Can we hear that, please?
Hi there, Hayden. My name's Andy. I'm reaching out to try and get some insight or words of wisdom regarding something I have been struggling with for a little bit. Um, so I've reached a level in my line of work that could be seen as rather prestigious. At least it's prestigious by my standards. And at the time, I felt a little bit lost um, as to how I managed to get the promotion. But now that I'm in the level and actually doing the work, it's kind of gotten a bit worse. Um, I tend to look around at my colleagues and peers at work, and after comparing myself to them, I always come up somewhere on the bottom of the ranking structure, I guess you'd put it as. Um, I don't believe I've done anything significant to get to where I'm at now. Like, I just did the work, and now I'm in control of a bunch of stuff, and it's just getting to my head a little bit of, do I actually deserve to be in the position I'm in? I often look at my peers and my colleagues, and I end up comparing myself to them and comparing just, in a sense, everything about me, my age, my accolades, the work that I've put in, and I compare it to the stuff that they've got going on and what they've done. And it just makes me feel like I don't belong, in a sense, around these guys. Um, Makes me feel a little bit like I'm an imposter in these rooms and at these events. It just doesn't compute really in my brain. Um, so I've started pushing extra, doing more and more, and going above the call of duty at work, which is starting to affect me outside of work because I'm just getting a bit burnt out. And I'm starting to actually second guess whether putting in that extra work and doing it is worth it because of the negative ramifications I'm having outside of work. And I have aspirations to go higher and further into the business, but I am worried that because I'm having these troubles at this level, is it just going to get worse? Or what would I have to do to try and make myself just be okay with getting to the point where I'm at? I guess the best outcome for me right now would be just somehow managing to get to a point where I'm actually okay to have the responsibilities that I have right now, um, or just wake up and be able to go to work and not worry that anyone else around me doesn't think that I'm qualified or in the right headspace. So, any thoughts or curiosities? That would be awesome. Cheers.
All right. Well, thank you to Andy, of course, for submitting such a real raw question. I think we'll probably find this is a core a core tenet of what I say, but there's obviously levels to this, right? And common things that I find, common dynamics that I can see with clients. I think, Greg, perhaps first starting, a common thing that I see is, we all wear these masks, have these personas, put certain expectations on ourselves. Again, we spoke about coping mechanisms in the last episode, which will be another core tenet. But one question perhaps that Andy could ask himself would be, where did he start learning, to pretend, or that he has to show up a certain way? Again, there's going to be levels to this. We'll look at values and alignment and maybe what he's comparing himself to in a moment. But I think, perhaps the first level of this would be looking at, perhaps has it served him in the past? Has there been a particular pain, a particular trauma? Maybe primary school, high school, he might have felt like he had to come across a certain way to be accepted, to be loved, to build rapport, parents or other. And so, the first thing would really be recognizing, is there a pattern of pretending or trying to prove yourself or be someone or act a certain way across your life? Yes, it's showing up in the work or the vocational area now, but is there a bigger picture pattern to that perhaps we can become conscious of?
Yeah, interesting. I imagine, from what I understand, the having imposter syndrome is typically aligned with some type of perfectionism or some type of standard that we're trying to reach. And interesting, you're saying, where might that have come from, that you picked up a message that you need to do a certain thing or perform a certain way to be okay or to be accepted. And that seems to come through in what I'm hearing as well, which is his end goal saying, I would love to be okay.
Yeah.
If I could say an end goal, it would be to be okay with the responsibilities that I have. And I think he said to feel that I'm not being judged by those around me.
Yes,
That I'm
so very
incompetent.
telling language there.
Yeah, that there's an external, I think they might think this of me, which is telling of imposter syndrome, which is, I think that there's a judgment element there. So yeah, I'm curious about that in terms of what we might pick up or what he might pick up by looking deeper and finding a pattern of, when other people think this or these things, when I do these things, I feel validated and feel accepted. And when I don't, this is how I feel and how that's playing out now. So,
to some of your points there, Greg, language, certainly in my line of work, language is very revealing. People often like to pretend it's not, in some forms of psychology, they call it a Freudian slip. But, you picked up on that very well, where you said, that judge, fear of being judged by others. So I think that's an interesting cue that perhaps we could go a little bit deeper on, or Andy, the caller, could. And then the other angle to it, again, was sort of, as you spoke about, just wanting to be okay, which to me just seems, I would imagine, we spoke about in that first episode about no joy and purpose, fulfillment. A bit more balance or equanimity within self being a more sustaining goal. And so I think that also speaks to the idea that, there are these inner polarities or inner conflicts that he's dealing with. And what I would probably suggest is there's evidence seemingly of this fear of being judged by others. We can't have a fear without a past experience of that. So I'd suggest there's a past experience of being judged by others, likely a coping strategy of how do I need to act or perform or be around others to be accepted. And then to the degree that we once judged ourselves for perhaps not fitting in or not performing to others is the degree that we put an unrealistic expectation on ourselves, even in the future, of how we think we need to be accepted. Hence, imposter syndrome, I'm ultimately trying to be someone for them, as opposed to what is most authentically to me or taking actions aligned with my values.
Yeah, powerful. So I imagine I can see this playing out where this is a work-based question, but it's actually a life question, which is, I can do things in a certain way to feel accepted by others, and in work, that's not currently working for me. And so there's something else I feel, and it actually shows up where he said, I've tried working harder. I've tried doing more. I'm trying to fix this, but I'm burning out, or I'm working too hard. So maybe this is not a good idea. So yeah, powerful.
Well, it's an endless loop.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that it's tugging on a bigger truth. I think that you're saying that there's something around, I don't know if you'd phrase it as personal acceptance of self, or knowing your own values. And then also this inner desire to be okay with the responsibilities, which to me speaks of acceptance as well.
Yeah.
There's an acceptance. So yeah, that's really powerful. There's an interesting part there around what I call attribution. So he said, I'm a little lost as to how I got the promotion. And
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, I did nothing significant to get here. So I think with imposter syndrome, there's when you do achieve things, you attribute it to luck, or other people help me, or there's very little to do with me. But where there's failure or problems, it's, that's me. You know, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that attribution where.
Absolutely. I feel like you're picking up you're 1 or 2 steps ahead of me today, Greg, with the detail there. But absolutely. I mean one of the first things that I thought is a lot of self-minimization in his language. So, the evidence, I believe, that Andy's saying is he is achieving, right?
Yeah.
There's evidence of that, right? You're not going to get to to where he's at without evidence of that. But then, using words like
sorry, just to jump in. He said a level of prestige, and then very quickly said, but in my own eyes.
Yep.
Is a kind of bit of minimizing of like, okay, you have achieved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's sort of, he's stating there's this external achievement, but then bringing it back to this lower self-image or lower perception of self, right? Which again, I would be wanting to look at when did that start? What is the pain that you're trying to avoid? And look, I mean, obviously, this isn't a therapy session as we've said, but it's, helping the listeners, bring some of these patterns in the default program more conscious. So simply just through being aware of it, they can start to call that out and actually go, hold on, actually, is this serving me? The truth is it will have served, believe it or not, Greg, it will have served him in the past with what his goals were. Perhaps, I know with myself, speaking from experience in college, I remember I, so desperately wanted to feel accepted or, part of the popular kids as most of us do. And it's interesting, in trying to practice what I preach perhaps, and doing the work that I've done. And, looking back on it retrospectively now and knowing, well, who were the people I wanted to be accepted by? College. Well, it's the sportos and the jocks and that sort of thing. Well, I didn't even enjoy sport, so I'm not even interested in that. But then so much of my worth was put into fitting in with these people. And so, first of all, as we'll lean into in a moment, there's that values piece of, well, who authentically are you? Both in the present day, but also in the past when perhaps you've judged yourself for not living someone else's values, which is never going to be sustainable and is always going to result in self-judgment and then this compensation of patterns to protect ourselves or get caught in. But so levels to this, and again, I think very quickly we sort of come back to where did this start, because it's not just work. And, these things, again, can be very slippery, Greg, where oftentimes, we can mask it with external success or presenting this persona or mask for everyone. And then when we do step out of that, whether it's starting to be more of ourself or, maybe Andy's a growth-based individual and he's challenging himself to grow, which probably is aligned with his values, but then it's triggering some of those old coping strategies that he has to confront in embracing these new challenges, which is actually part of his purpose, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah, I heard that saying he would like to aspire to more within the company, but, and then that comes in. And I noticed some belonging language as well, which is when I look at other people's age and what they have achieved. So you go, well, there's a comparison of age. This is who I am and this is who you are. This is how old I am. This is how old you are. There's because I think imposter syndrome can show up in a big way where there's an underrepresentation of people like you doing the thing that you're doing. So if there's an underrepresentation of women or people of color, or like you said, his age or whatever the thing happens to be, and I heard about it with apparently the Institute of Directors in New Zealand that go to study there I don't know if it's, Institute of Directors or whether it's a training program for directors, that there's a very high percentage of men that are already directors that are saying, oh, in hindsight, I should probably get some training. And there's a high percentage of women that are not yet directors but want to be very well trained and competent by the time they step into those roles. So there's this representation piece. But just to link that back to belonging, where he said, they're this age and I'm not, whether he's younger or older, I think, I assume younger.
Yes.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on if this came from fundamentally somewhere earlier and there's a pain that you're avoiding and something that you want and there's values in there and acceptance, what might be a good place for Andy to explore to take it in a healthy direction? I mean, how do you start to unpack that or work out where it's coming from?
Absolutely. So I think, recapping what we've just said, the first where I would love to see Andy start, where he could begin this, his next steps, in fact, would be, again, starting to bring some awareness to how I would suggest this isn't just a career dynamic. This is, very likely a lifelong dynamic. I would be incredibly surprised if there's not a pattern there. And what he'll find is the area that the pattern plays out will evolve over his life based on what's most important to him, right? So he's deploying that coping strategy or that mask or trying to, be someone for other people in an area that is important to him, because historically, whether it's fitting in socially or, trying to meet a woman, whatever it is, that's where we started originally, using that strategy. So
just to jump in, so you're saying if he's looking for patterns going back through his life, it might not always be work if that wasn't his highest priority at the time, but you should be able to find that pattern.
Yes.
Somewhere in, whether it's related, whatever you were seeking at the time.
Yes, and look, that is absolutely correct. And maybe if I just add to that, Greg, something you made me aware of there is in identifying the coping strategy. That is a very effective way at looking at perhaps where this started. So not necessarily just saying where have I felt like an imposter, although that is very much a valuable question. But where have I started and Andy said, I believe he said, sort of approaching burnout, going up and beyond was the language he used, right? So where in different areas of my life have I started feeling like I'm burning out, going up and beyond, taking on all this extra work? Now, maybe work could be interchanged for other areas, might be doing more for other people or prioritizing other people that we've, don't have things in common with, in my case at school. But, where has he had that same or similar coping strategy of overcompensating? Because that will be very revealing to where was the unresolved pain point that he's come up with that unconscious strategy, okay? So I think starting to build some awareness to that. Likely there's not going to be just one moment. It's going to be a number of moments. Okay. Usually there's what I call the root cause, which, is almost an art in itself. Perhaps why I've got a job in finding.
It's not easy to do by yourself often.
Yes, not at all. But I think, and obviously the goal of the show is building awareness over time. You will start to go, that's a familiar feeling, or, I'm going through this cycle of burnout again, or I'm getting resentful at others for not acknowledging me for the work I'm doing. And so where has that thought pattern or physiological symptom in your body come up before, and starting to recognize that? Now, to your point in making this practical, once we're aware of that, I think, we can start to actually understand who were we at that time of our life. So again, I'll speak from experience, and I won't make assumptions here for Andy, but again, if I go back to my experience in high school, it's almost comical that, how much I wanted to be accepted by the sports people, that sort of thing, where in fact, I still to this day, sports isn't particularly my thing. And, when I go back and look at what was most important to me at the time, what I actually loved was, strategy card games, believe it or not. So I've always been a, deep thinker, strategy, that sort of thing. And interestingly, that would be an evolution of my values at the time, right? Now it's the problem solving, working things out for clients. But in the past, it was, Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, that sort of great stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I remember having, such a focus on, I would be at school and I would be putting this expectation on myself to be someone that I'm not, to fit in with the sports people, to speak that language. And I'm completely minimizing my love for the cards and the tournaments. And I was very good at that. I traveled all around New Zealand competing in that. I had a lot of self-worth in that area. but then I would minimize that area and judge myself for not achieving or not being able to speak that language or build rapport with the sports people. So in understanding some of the moments that may have contributed to this or the root causes, and in understanding what you valued most at the time, and then where you were minimizing yourself by trying to be not someone that you're not, you can start to actually ask yourself, well, what would have been the drawbacks if I did fit in with the sports people in my instance? And I can tell you through reflections I've already done, is that, you know, for me to be that person for the sports people, I would have had to give up what I loved. I would have had to, you know, give up the card games, the travel, the, you know, after school practice, preparing my strategies and that sort of thing with the card games. That would have gone into all the sports training and that sort of thing, or hanging out with these guys, going to the parties. And as much as that was the fantasy that I put on myself and judged myself for not doing, that actually wouldn't have given me that sense of purpose and sustaining fulfillment that I actually have now, if you look at how it's evolved in my life. So I think if you can understand what you actually valued back then when you were judging yourself, or Andy felt like he was judged, and actually look at what did you value and have some actually acceptance and acknowledgement for who you were back then, as opposed to, again, the original fantasy or expectation that you may have started putting on yourself, that everything is built off from there.
Yeah. Awesome. And I can hear you saying there, you can work out, well, it's just as well that I haven't done that because it's actually served me for that frame in my own life. I think where I have received affirmation in an area that's really important to me actually led to, it sounds like in Andy's, that maybe there's an absence of affirmation by others, or by others that matter to him, you know, wanting to seek that approval or giving it to himself. I've been in environments where it was lavished, it was given. And so I pursued that, and I led to burning out in an environment where praise was given in abundance. But it also was equally feeding a need that I was becoming someone that I wasn't values aligned with, because it was meeting that significant base need at the time. And so you've got an example of not doing that, I think, which is great. It's going, look, well, the benefit of me not being affirmed by the jocks, the sporty people, was that I could pursue a bit more of a lane, whereas I think you can work both ways. And I think both Andy's and my previous journey in my 20s of burning out is this: if you're trying to be someone that you're not really, or it's not values aligned, the risk is that gap between who you are and what you really value and who you're trying to be to receive acceptance will burn you out.
Yes.
Regardless. So what would be something for Andy to try and work out what is it self-acceptance he needs to give himself? Is it working out what he truly values and working from that place? Or how can he start to live more? Well, like he said, if his end goal, how can he start to be okay with his responsibilities? What would be a path to acceptance potentially, or some work that he could do?
So absolutely. So it's all of those things, Greg. And again, we're going to find this is a core tenet on the show, you know, the real authenticity, the values, what gives you purpose. And in fact, you know, I think we were discussing, in the following episodes, we're going to look at, goal setting and making sure that's real and aligned with your values. So perhaps in the next or coming episodes, we can give some more practical tools and frameworks for that. But where Andy would need to start, or where I would suggest would be the most bang for buck for him, would be objectively looking at in his life now. I'd give him 3 questions to look at, okay? One would be, what gives him the most energy, okay? And we don't want to look at just the surface level answers, because, it's not just work. It might be certain aspects of his work, right? It may not be. There may be certain friends, and some friends he's people pleasing or going up and beyond or trying to be someone that he's not. And then some friends that there is that real connection that gives him energy. So being highly specific in what gives you energy is one cue that I would look at, okay? Another would be, what do you love to learn about? And this doesn't have to be, formal study, academia. This can be YouTube videos, talking to a friend. I will say to my clients, if we went out for a coffee or a drink and I said, mate, have you heard about XYZ? Where would you come alive the most, right? So top 3 things that give you the most energy, top 3 things you love to learn about most, and top 3 most consistent long-term goals, okay? There is a number of questions in reality that I use for the values or purpose priorities process that I take clients through. And, like I said, it's actually a goal of mine to have that as a resource for the show shortly. So, the listeners can look out for that hopefully in the coming episodes. But those 3 questions are 3 of the 10 questions that I recommend clients asking. And the goal there is to, again, not inject these idealisms on yourself of who you think you should be or who you've learnt to be for everyone else, but actually look at, again, those 3 questions authentically. What are the most common patterns that come up? And then, the art form to it, Greg, is really reflecting on that and go, well, what do they represent? So again, speaking from my own life, I'm very, I guess you could say I'm a bit of a workaholic in some regards. But I love problem solving. I love understanding. I love working things out. And I also love creating and building, whether that's my own business or helping people build their life. And so in those 3 areas, I come alive, I have resilience, and I have self-worth. But if I was to compare myself to, if I was to put an expectation on myself to get all my accounting or GST done every time, maybe I'd beat myself up because that's not as closely aligned with my values. Or, one dynamic I found going back to comparisons or imposter syndrome was many, many years ago when I first started my business. Even though I was still getting great results with clients and really meaningful relationships, there was a point where I found myself going, do I need to do this PhD course? Do I need to study to be a clinical psychologist? And that was solely based on me not being clear on my value of problem solving and working things out. And basically, in not having that clarity, we default to this, to this pain avoidance and comparing to others. And when I was able to go, hold on, Hayden, you wouldn't let a client away with this, right? What do you value? And I went, well, I value problem solving and working things out. And, that isn't traditionally the essence of clinical psychology, or at least I don't need to be a clinical psychologist and the medications and the diagnosis to tap into that part that I love. So where Andy should start is answering those 3 questions, looking objectively at what are the most common themes that comes up that give him purpose, that are the priorities that drive him, and start to actually, circling back around, start honoring his achievements, past and present, in accordance with those. Because you'll recall that he actually mentioned that we spoke, Greg, you noticed it very early on, that he was minimizing himself. I've basically just saying, I've just done what's required of me, right? Or compared to these other people, it hasn't been anything prestigious. But perhaps, if he has a certain value on, maybe it's relationships, and maybe he's not let's say if he does a real estate agent, maybe he doesn't know everything about the property market, but he builds amazing trust with people and he values the relationships and he values family and getting them into the right home, for example. Well, it would be wise to audit your actions against the relationships in that real estate example and that relationship building, as opposed to all the technical details. So getting clear on those priorities that give him purpose, and then actually starting to accept and value your actions based on how they're congruent there, not the comparisons or the fantasies that we put on ourselves.
Yeah, fantastic. I can see there's such a power in being able to work out what you actually value. And I think if you haven't done that for a while, you think that the way you have been living is doing that, but actually coming back to what you can really be proud of and own yourself. And I love what you're saying there around where there's a lack of attribution of his effort to himself on here's what I actually have done to be able to achieve these things, to be able to write those things out and give them their worthy place and the effort that he has put in. I'm reminded of the growth mindset by Carol Dweck, where, popularized by her that term, the idea instead of a fixed mindset of either I've made it or I haven't, I'm smart or I'm not, or being affirmed when you're young can be, oh, they're the smart one, they're the one, that can be detrimental as opposed to I'm someone who works hard. I'm someone who puts in my best every time. I'm someone who does hard things. And even though it's difficult, I'm committed to growth. All these healthy things that are around things that you can own as opposed to outcomes. And so I'm hearing in your language too, essentially the growth mindset aspect of reframing, challenge. I'm so young in this role. No one else looks like they've achieved what I have.
Yes.
All this other stuff going. I saw a clip the other day and there was someone speaking to a team of young athletes and they said, I don't want you to be the best. I want you to do your best. If we try and be the best, we'll be focused on comparison. And that is not where we want our energy going. We want to do our best. That's something you can always do. You can always be proud of and always know whether you've done it or not. And so hearing that and what you're saying, like owning your values, doing your best. And I imagine there's an exciting part for Andy if he does have future aspirations. Andy, what would your best look like? Where would you go in the organization? What would you achieve if you were free in that aspect? And maybe there's much more that he comes alive and goes, well, if I wasn't hedging my bets to just do enough to seek approval or not, you just go,
Yes.
What if you're just living, mate?
Or doubling down. I love that, Greg. Doubling down on the parts, again, that are sincere to you as you become more conscious of that. Because, jokes aside, that hedging your bets is very likely very relevant, right? If we look at Andy's actions, we will find that what he is doing does represent his values or what gives him purpose to some degree, but is it the most effective and efficient and sustaining or fulfilling way to do it? I would argue not. And so, I think one of the key themes today, Greg, I'm curious any insights or maybe breakthrough moments you might have had, but I think one of the key themes here today is, what are you comparing yourself to? Okay. And, again, rather than this fantasy that we put on ourselves to try and be, X person for others, actually what are our values and how can we take aligned actions through that? And in doing that, you'll find that actually, you'll even be able to reframe this idea of being an imposter. Are you an imposter or are you maybe a beginner in this new role that you've stepped into, but that new role is aligned and congruent with your values. And based on that, you're authentic and you're engaged and you're brought in. There's nothing fake about that.
That's so powerful. Even the word imposter syndrome and labeling it is a frame that you choose to put on your current situation. I think a key moment for me or a key takeaway is that what we focus on and the story we tell ourselves about that is so powerful. Yeah. And with Andy saying, I'm focusing on how others might perceive me, that can be very telling on where we're getting our sense of acceptance from. I think for me personally, that's an ongoing journey as a recovering people pleaser to continually go, am I proud of the actions I've been taking? Am I living out what I value most? And the amount of energy and alignment and inner peace that comes from that is really powerful. So I'm really excited for Andy being able to take whatever his next step is that you've suggested, because there's a lot of freedom to be had there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so thank you very much for tuning in to this week's episode. And as per, please, if you haven't subscribed or left us a review, a comment, as we're building this out, I said, building and designing is one of my values. We would really appreciate any support helping get the message out there with what we're passionate about. So thank you for watching, and until next time.